She stood at the edge of history, mostly unnamed in sermons, barely noticed in retellings, yet deeply embedded in the legacy of a nation. While Joseph's journey from pit to palace captivated generations, while his dreams and rise to power were echoed in every corner of sacred storytelling, the woman who walked beside him in Pharaoh's court was veiled in silence. She bore the sons who would become tribes. She carried the future of Israel within her womb, and yet her name, Asenath, remained in the margins, forgotten not by God, but by men. History remembers Joseph, the dreamer, the prisoner turned prince, the interpreter of visions. But Asenath, she was Pharaoh's gift, a footnote in the ascent of a Hebrew slave, an Egyptian woman with a pagan lineage, placed beside the most powerful man in Egypt. To the world, she was convenience, a political necessity, a match to give Joseph credibility in a foreign land. But heaven does not see as men see. What seemed incidental was intentional. What seemed secondary was sacred. Asenath was a daughter of priests, raised in the city of On, a place where the sun god Ra was worshipped with incense and chants. Her home was filled with idols and rituals, and her identity was wrapped in Egyptian power. She belonged to a world built on pyramids, dynasties, and cosmic balance maintained through blood and incantation. And yet, the God of Israel had chosen her. Not by genealogy, not by law, but by purpose. She had no dreams like Joseph, no visions, no voice, only a silent transformation. But it was that silence that carried the weight of destiny. Behind every great move of God, there are people in the shadows, women in stillness, converts whose names are nearly erased, but whose faith shifts the future. Asenath was one of them. She would not speak in the pages of Scripture, but she would mother a movement. She would become the first woman to bridge Egypt and Israel, not as a threat, but as a vessel. She was a symbol before symbols, a testimony before there were psalms. To sing it, forgotten by history, yes, but held tightly in the ark of divine redemption. Through her, God would not just bless a man, but establish a legacy. And though her story begins in silence, it would echo through generations. She was Asenath, the woman history forgot, but heaven never did. She was born into a world of sun gods and sacred chants, a place where divinity was carved in stone and carried in golden processions. Her earliest memories were not of lullabies, but of incense smoke and hieroglyphs on temple walls. In the city of On Heliopolis, the heart of Egyptian religion pulsed like fire, and her family stood at the center of it. Her father was a high priest, her home a sanctuary to the gods. The rhythms of her life were set by sacred calendars, ritual baths, and offerings to Ra, the solar deity who ruled the skies. Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, was destined for priestly honor and ceremonial power. Her name itself meant belonging to Neith, a goddess of war and weaving. She was marked from birth as one chosen by Egyptian divinity. But under the layers of ceremonial linen and sacred duty, something in her soul ached. Though she performed the rites and recited the prayers, her spirit was never still. She watched the priests chant before lifeless idols. She saw the blood of animals poured at the feet of silent statues. And though her lips spoke the names of Egypt's gods, her heart remained unconvinced. There was beauty in her world, yes, grandeur, legacy, and art. But there was no voice, no presence, no answer. She lived in palatial halls adorned with papyrus, scrolls and columns painted in lapis blue. She ate from golden dishes, drank from carved stone, wore silks dyed in crimson and saffron. To all who saw her, she was a daughter of glory, a woman of privilege and purpose. But inside, she was hollow, and she did not know why. The gods she had been taught to revere were many. They ruled over water, crops, death, and fertility. But none knew her name. None touched her heart. She began to dream, though no dreams were recorded. She began to wander the halls of the temple, not with awe, but with silence. Her questions deepened, her loneliness sharpened. And though she would not say it aloud, she longed for a God who could speak, a God who could see. This longing did not come from rebellion, it came from truth uninvited. The kind that stirs in the depths of one's soul without permission. And it was this quiet unrest that prepared her for what was coming. She did not know that a Hebrew prisoner was rising, that a famine would soon reshape empires, that a man who feared a different God would be placed beside Pharaoh himself. She did not know that her entire life of ritual had been a preparation for one holy interruption. In a world of idols, her heart remained unbowed. In the temple of Ra, a hunger grew for something real. She was raised among gods who could not speak, and still she waited for a whisper. The palace was filled with the murmurs of political ascension. Egypt had never seen such a rise. A Hebrew prisoner elevated to prince, placed at Pharaoh's side with a signet and a title. Whispers passed through the marble halls like smoke. But the one who listened most carefully was not a scribe or official. It was Asenath, the woman promised to him, the daughter of priests who now belonged by decree to a man whose God had no statue, no altar, no earthly form. She watched him from a distance at first, heard him speak not in riddles, but in clarity, saw his eyes not fixed on power, but on purpose, and something broke within her. He did not speak of Ra. He did not offer incense. He walked as if he knew the one who shaped the stars. And though she had once stood confidently among priests and idols, now she could not breathe beneath their gaze. The gods she had served fell silent as he spoke of a God who lives. She withdrew, not to sulk, not to hide, but to seek, and so began 7 days that would remake her soul. She entered a private chamber, hidden from the courtyards and voices of men. She brought no servants, no idols, only herself. And for 7 days she fasted. Not because she was strong, but because she was desperate. She wept without pride, tore her garments, and fell prostrate on cold stone. Her lips, once used to polished prayers, now stumbled through groans and questions. She called out to the God she did not know by name, the God Joseph worshipped, the God of the Hebrews. And there, in her rawness, something stirred. The days blurred. Hunger gnawed at her, but she did not rise. On the 4th night, she lay in complete stillness, unsure if sleep had come or vision had taken her. In the quiet, she felt light, warm, not blinding, a presence, not of this earth, but known in her bones. A whisper, not in words, but in truth. She was no longer alone. Something within her shattered. Pride, lineage, falsehood. Her heart broke. Open like a vessel too full, she poured out the remnants of Egypt's hold on her. And as she wept, she was not met with judgment, but with mercy. When the 7th morning came, she stood, not as a priest's daughter, but as a woman transformed. Her steps were slow, but steady. Her eyes, swollen from tears, burned with something new, recognition. She had not found a God. She had been found by him, the living one, the God who sees, the God who answers, the God who loves. And when Joseph saw her again, he did not see the woman Pharaoh had given him. He saw the one God had chosen. She did not tell the world what happened in that room, but it lived in her silence, and in the years to come, it would live in the sons she would raise. Her surrender was not a weakness. It was her beginning. The years passed with the quiet rhythm of sacred purpose. Egypt knew her as the wife of the vizier, adorned in linen and gold, walking the corridors of power with grace. But her truest role was not seen in public courts or among royal guests. It was hidden in the chambers of motherhood, in the whispered prayers over sleeping infants, in the lessons spoken softly beneath the pillars of an Egyptian palace. She, the woman once wrapped in idolatry, was now the vessel of a promise that stretched far beyond Nile and throne. Her first son she named Manasseh. Joseph's name for him meant forgetting. For God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. But for Asenath, it was not forgetfulness that held her heart, but transformation. The pain of her past was not erased, it had simply been redeemed. In Manasseh's eyes, she saw the faithfulness of a God she had once not known, and as she nursed him, as she soothed him to sleep, she sang not to Neith or Ra, but to the one who had called her daughter. Then came Ephraim. A second boy, a second blessing. His name meant fruitfulness. For God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. She smiled at the irony. Egypt had once been her prison, her spiritual exile. Now, in its soil, she bore fruit for the covenant. 2 sons, Hebrews by faith, Egyptians by birth, raised at the edge of 2 worlds, and she knew it was her task to plant in them the truth Joseph had entrusted to her. She taught them of the God who speaks, of the God who redeems. She led them not through ritual, but through reverence. When the day came that Joseph brought the boys to Jacob, her heart trembled. This old man, their grandfather, was the last thread to the ancient promises. His hands trembled with age, but his eyes, though dimmed, saw further than she could imagine. He crossed his arms, blessing Ephraim over Manasseh, a reversal, a prophecy, a divine pattern repeating. The younger elevated, the unexpected chosen. Asenath watched in silence, but within her, awe bloomed. Her sons were not simply children, they were tribes. From her womb would come leaders, lands, lineages. She had no tent in Canaan, no birthright from Abraham. But through her, the family of Israel expanded. 12 tribes would walk into promise. 2 would carry her legacy. She had once knelt before idols. Now her sons knelt before blessing. Her motherhood was more than biology. It was mission. She was the matriarch no one named in the genealogy, but heaven recorded her faith like fire. And through her obedience, her love, her transformation, she shaped the very future of God's people. There are stories that live between the lines of Scripture, whispered through generations, preserved in midrash and memory. Asenath's origin is one such story, not fully told, but never truly forgotten. While Egypt claimed her as daughter of Potipharah, high priest of On, other voices in the tradition offer a deeper, more haunting beginning. They say she was not born of temples, but of trauma, that her blood ran not only with the power of Egypt, but with the sorrow of Israel. Long ago, before Joseph ever dreamed, his sister Dinah suffered violation in Shechem. A daughter of Jacob, silenced by shame, her story nearly vanished into the folds of patriarchal narrative. But some say a child came from that pain, a daughter born of violation and then sent away, hidden, covered, removed from the eyes of her grandfather. It is said that she was placed at the gates of Egypt, where a noble family took her in and gave her another name, Asenath. The orphan made royal, the wounded made wise. If the tale is true, then her life is a circle of return. Born in anguish, raised among idols, restored through marriage to her own blood, unknowing perhaps, but divinely orchestrated. What began in silence became a song. What was cast out became cornerstone. And what was meant for shame, God wrapped in glory. She never spoke of her beginnings. Whether she knew or not is lost to history. But the ache in her soul, the longing for more, the fire that stirred when she first heard Joseph's voice, it all hints at a memory buried deep in the body. A knowing without words, a recognition of exile, and the trembling joy of finally being seen. God, in his mercy, does not discard what men deem unworthy. He gathers the broken branches, grafts them into the vine, and calls them fruitful. Asenath's life is a mosaic of brokenness made whole. From trauma, he drew tenderness. From rejection, he raised royalty. She would not only bear tribes, she would redeem a bloodline. She, the hidden daughter, would become the chosen mother. Through her, God answered pain with promise. He took what was wrapped in human disgrace and wove it into his divine design. In a land that worshipped golden gods, he planted a soul that carried both Hebrew blood and heavenly purpose. And from her lineage came the tribes that would one day walk into Canaan, singing psalms and carrying the ark. She was not defined by the darkness that preceded her. She was defined by the light she chose to carry forward. She left no speeches, no recorded words, no song attributed to her voice. The scrolls of Israel do not quote her, and yet her silence shaped the foundation of tribes. Asenath was not a prophetess or a judge. She did not stand on battlefields or under palm trees. She did not lead armies, nor was she named among matriarchs in the books that followed. But legacies are not always loud. Some are carved in quiet obedience, in faithfulness, hidden behind palace doors, in a single decision to surrender when everything else said to remain the same. Asenath's story is not told in the rhythm of triumph, but in the weight of transformation. She bore no trumpet, no title, only fruit. Sons who would become nations, a household where Yahweh was spoken of in Egypt's halls. A quiet shaping of faith passed from her lips to the ears of children destined for prophecy. Her worship was not done before crowds, but within chambers. Her legacy was not marked in public records, but in lineage, woven into the bones of Ephraim and Manasseh. She was a foreigner once, a daughter of Egypt, a woman of war gods and sun temples. And yet, by grace, she was welcomed not as an intruder, but as family. Her life became a living parable that God's arms stretch further than lineage, further than law. That faith is not about where you begin, but who you follow. She followed the voice of the living God into mystery, into motherhood, into mission. Centuries later, her name would still be absent from most lips, forgotten in the stories of Joseph's greatness, overlooked in the triumph of her sons, and yet her presence lingers in the very structure of the 12 tribes, in the blessing passed down through generations, in the reality that God chose her not because of her birth, but because of her surrender. She speaks to every outsider who has wondered if they belong, to every woman whose voice goes unheard, but whose hands carry blessing, to the converts, the overlooked, the unnamed. Her silence says what words cannot, that God sees, that he remembers, that he chooses not based on noise but on heart. Asenath was a mother, yes, but she was more. She was a vessel of reversal, of redemption, of grace. Through her, the covenant extended beyond its borders. Through her, the God of Israel showed that he is not the God of bloodlines only, but of faith. And though she never lifted her voice in Scripture, the echo of her surrender still shapes the story of a people. She was the forgotten wife, but heaven never forgot, and the legacy she left behind still lives, not in monuments, but in mercy.